You'll never understand our generation marketing team, mocks 58-year-old. Her campaign goes viral overnight. She arrived at the marketing firm in a simple dress and asked to help with the campaign in exchange for a chance. Everyone laughed, called her outdated until she presented her ideas and showed them what real insight looked like. The sun filtered through the floor to ceiling windows when Diana stepped into the lobby of Pulse Marketing Solutions. Her outfit was modest, her graying hair styled conservatively, and the hesitation in her movement suggested someone unfamiliar with such modern corporate spaces. But her eyes, despite carrying the weight of years, held a sharp intelligence, an intelligence that no one there seemed equipped to recognize. Michael was hunched over his desk, stressed and frustrated, surrounded by analytics printouts. Beside him, two other marketing strategists, Jessica and Tyler, were frantically brainstorming ideas. The company's creative director, Amanda, stood leaning against the glass partition, arms crossed, visibly anxious but attempting to hide it. "I can't believe we're stuck like this," she muttered, pacing back and forth. "You need a viral campaign by tomorrow or we lose this account." Michael lifted his head, rubbing his tired eyes. "Nothing we've created is resonating with the target demographic. Every idea feels forced or disconnected. We've been trying for 2 weeks straight and nothing lands," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "The client wants authenticity. They want something that actually connects with people emotionally." Jessica added, "Our usual formulas aren't working this time. The algorithm changes, the audience preferences shift, and we're always playing catch-up. We need something revolutionary, something nobody expects." Tyler was scrolling through social media feeds obsessively, looking for trends and patterns. "Everything feels tired. Everything feels done before. How do you create something original when millions of creators are doing the exact same thing every single day?" Amanda checked her phone again, tension visible in her jaw. "That's 18 hours until the presentation. 18 hours to come up with something that will make a Fortune 500 company want to renew their contract with us." It was then that Diana stepped forward quietly. Her presence seemed almost invisible at first, easy to overlook completely. Everyone turned slowly to look at her, taking in her appearance with undisguised skepticism. Amanda's expression immediately became dismissive, a slight frown crossing her face. "Can I help?" Diana asked, her voice calm and measured. Jessica let out a laugh that sounded almost patronizing. "Help? No offense, but this is cutting-edge marketing strategy. This is about understanding Gen Z and millennial psychology. Do you even use social media? Have you ever posted anything online?" She exchanged glances with Tyler, who smirked knowingly. Tyler added, "Yeah, I'm sure you have some great insights for us. Why don't you go sit in the waiting area instead of wasting our time with outdated thinking?" Michael shook his head slowly, though with slightly more restraint than the others. "Ma'am, this is about data analytics, algorithm optimization, and viral mechanics. This requires understanding the psychology of shares, likes, and comments. This isn't something you just figure out based on life experience." Amanda folded her arms tighter. "How did you even get back here? Our reception should have asked you to check in first. Do you have an appointment?" But Diana didn't react to their dismissal or their condescension. She simply looked at the work spread across multiple screens, studying it carefully. Campaign concepts filled the monitors, each one technically competent but somehow missing something essential. The problem had been frustrating this team relentlessly for weeks. "May I?" Diana asked, gesturing toward the nearest workstation. "Go ahead if you want to prove us right," Tyler muttered, turning away. "We'll watch you struggle." Amanda started to call security, but something in Diana's bearing gave her pause. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence despite her age, or the way her eyes scanned the work with genuine comprehension. She nodded slightly, deciding to allow this strange woman a few minutes. Diana sat down at the workstation with deliberate care. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising fluidity and purpose. She navigated through the analytics, examined the social media performance data, studied the demographics and engagement metrics. She didn't work frantically like Michael had been doing. Instead, each action seemed thoughtful and strategic, like someone who understood something fundamental about human behavior. She pulled up previous successful campaigns from years past, comparing them to the current attempts. She studied not just what performed well, but why it performed well. She examined the emotional triggers, the narratives, the human elements beneath the numbers. 15 minutes passed with only the sound of typing. 20 minutes. 30. Jessica had stopped laughing and was watching with reluctant attention. Tyler had returned to the desk, standing silently. Michael was leaning over Diana's shoulder now, trying to understand her approach. "Wait," Michael said suddenly. "You're building the narrative around memory, not trend." "That's completely different from what we've been doing. Most marketers focus on what's new," Diana said without looking away from the screen. "They chase trends because trends are measurable and quantifiable. But what actually moves people emotionally is connection to something they remember, something they recognize, something that makes them feel understood across time. She continued typing, building out a campaign framework that was simple but profoundly different. She created a video concept, a social media strategy, a hashtag campaign. Everything centered on a single theme, the moments that defined different generations, the things that stayed the same even as the world changed. There, Diana said finally, leaning back from the keyboard. This is what connects people. Not chasing what's trending now, but acknowledging what has always mattered. Every generation thinks theirs is unique, but they all want the same things. They want to be understood. They want to matter. They want their experiences validated. Michael's eyes widened as he studied what Diana had created. He looked at the analytics immediately, ran projections on engagement potential. Every metric suggested this approach would perform exceptionally well. The concept was simple, elegant, and somehow deeply true. This is extraordinary, Sarah whispered, her skepticism completely dissolved. This is actually brilliant. Tyler stood frozen, his earlier arrogance vanishing completely. He looked embarrassed now, ashamed of how he had mocked her. Amanda moved closer to examine the work with fresh perspective. Her expression shifted gradually from dismissal to something approaching wonder. How did you understand this so quickly? We've been overthinking this for weeks. We have MBAs on this team. We have people with extensive digital marketing experience. How is this possible? Diana stood up slowly, stepping away from the desk. Sometimes when you've lived through enough change, you understand what doesn't change underneath it all. Insight isn't about your age or how current you are with trends. It's about understanding human nature itself, which hasn't evolved much in thousands of years. Michael rose from his chair and extended his hand formally. I'm sorry we treated you that way. I'm genuinely sorry. What's your name? I need to know who you are. Diana, she replied, shaking his hand firmly. Diana Mitchell. I'm Michael Torres. What you've created here is exceptional. I've never seen someone understand consumer psychology at this depth before. It's like you could see through all the noise to what actually matters. Amanda stepped forward, her anxiety replaced with something different, something like genuine respect mixed with curiosity. How did you know so much about marketing and human behavior? Most people your age, well, they typically dismiss digital marketing or don't understand modern platforms and strategies. Diana looked out the window at the city skyline, the late afternoon light casting long shadows. I didn't just wake up here, Amanda. 30 years ago, I was in this industry before it was even called digital marketing. I worked in advertising, brand building, consumer psychology when we relied on television, radio, and print. Then life happened. Career interruptions, family responsibilities, health challenges. I lost my position and my place in an industry I helped shape and evolve. The room seemed to process this revelation slowly and carefully. But you never stopped understanding people, Michael said quietly. It wasn't a question. No, Diana agreed, turning back to face them. I couldn't stop. Even when I wasn't working in the field professionally, I was observing the world. I watched how my children grew up, how my grandchildren used technology, how different generations responded to the same stimuli in different ways. I read books about psychology and behavior. I studied how culture shifted and evolved. The world changed constantly, but human motivation remained fundamentally similar underneath it all. You just have to remember that behind all the technology and platforms, people still want the same things they've always wanted. Michael looked at the campaign concepts again with new understanding. This is going to save everything for us. The client presentation is tomorrow morning, and without this fresh perspective, we were going to present something that would have been technically competent but emotionally hollow. We would have been rejected and possibly lost the account permanently. Where are you working currently? Amanda asked Diana, though everyone could guess from her appearance that she probably wasn't employed formally. Nowhere in particular, Diana said simply and honestly. I've been doing freelance work, consulting occasionally, trying to piece together a living. I heard about the opportunities in marketing agencies and I thought maybe I could find work in my field again. I didn't expect to get past reception, but I was persistent. Jessica, who had been quiet since the campaign concept proved its brilliance, finally spoke again. How did you manage to get in here past our security protocols? They were pretty strict about walk-ins and appointments. I told them I was a potential consultant with relevant experience, Diana said with a slight smile. I told them about my background. They seemed skeptical initially, but I was polite and professional. Eventually, they agreed to let me speak with someone in the office. Amanda made a decision, then you could see it shift in her expression. Diana, how would you feel about working here with us full-time? Not as a consultant or temporary help, as a senior strategist. Your name on our roster officially. A competitive salary, benefits, and everything that comes with it. stability and respect. Michael looked surprised at the generous offer, though not negatively. Even Jessica and Tyler, despite their earlier cruelty and dismissal, didn't object. They had witnessed what Diana could do firsthand. Diana was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something profound. Why would you hire someone who walked in here looking like this? Why take a chance on someone from my generation? Because, Amanda said with conviction, I'd rather have someone who understands human nature at your level than 100 strategists who are all chasing the same trends. And because I believe in giving second chances to people who clearly never stop thinking and growing, even when the world told them they were obsolete. Over the next 3 months, Diana transformed Pulse Marketing Solutions completely. She wasn't just creating successful campaigns. She was teaching actively, mentoring younger strategists, showing them how to think about audiences as human beings rather than data points. Michael became her closest collaborator, learning not just the strategic frameworks but also the philosophical approach behind them. Jessica and Tyler, initially skeptical and dismissive, became some of her most dedicated students. They began to understand that dismissing experience based on age had cost them weeks of struggle. Diana showed them that wisdom and insight could unlock creative solutions that data alone could never produce. The client presentation went flawlessly without complications. Not only did the campaign concept resonate immediately, but Diana had also provided insights about implementation that exceeded all client expectations. The investor and decision makers on the client side actually asked who would develop the strategy. And when they learned about Diana and her background, the story began spreading rapidly through industry circles. Articles started appearing in marketing publications across the country. 58-year-old marketing genius develops viral campaign strategy. Then it evolved into something bigger. From unemployment to industry leader, the Diana Mitchell story. The narrative captured people's imagination because it was real and authentic, because it wasn't about luck or perfect timing. It was about someone who had refused to accept that her value had expired simply because of her age. But Diana didn't allow the attention to change who she was. Instead, she used it deliberately and strategically. 6 months after starting at Pulse Marketing, Diana founded a nonprofit organization called The Bridge Strategy. The mission was clear and direct. Identify talented professionals from older generations who had been pushed out of the marketing industry through age discrimination. People who, like her, possessed genuine expertise and insight but had been rendered invisible by an industry obsessed with youth and novelty. The organization didn't just provide jobs to displaced professionals. It provided comprehensive training in modern marketing tools and platforms, mentorship from current industry leaders, networking opportunities with major brands, and most importantly, it provided dignity and validation. It recognized that valuable expertise doesn't expire simply because someone reaches a certain age, and that some of the best strategic minds might have been forced out of the industry simply because of unconscious bias and ageism. The first cohort included 20 professionals carefully selected. A woman who had been an award-winning copywriter for 30 years until she aged out of consideration. A man who had pioneered brand strategy but couldn't find employment after his company downsized. A former director who had built campaigns for major corporations but couldn't overcome the bias against hiring older workers. Michael, Jessica, and Tyler all became mentors in the program without hesitation. The same people who had mocked Diana on that first day now understood the lesson she embodied. Dismissing people based on age is a form of bias that blinds you to wisdom and valuable perspective. Amanda became one of the organization's biggest supporters and champions. She invested not just financial resources but her own time and influence, helping Diana navigate the nonprofit landscape, connecting her with industry leaders and major brands who believed in the mission deeply. The real turning point came when one of the Bridge Strategy's first cohort members was hired by a major Fortune 500 company as a senior strategist. Then another was recruited by a prestigious advertising agency. Then several others found positions at competitive firms. Within 2 years, the employment success rate for the Bridge Strategy participants far exceeded typical job placement statistics. Diana continued working at Pulse Marketing while running the Bridge Strategy. She was no longer the woman in simple clothes seeking any opportunity. She had stable employment, a respectable income, recognition in her industry. But more importantly, she had purpose and meaning again. She had agency and control over her professional destiny. She had proven that the story of her career wasn't over, that age and market discrimination didn't have to define what she could still accomplish. One evening, 2 years after that first day when she walked into the office, Diana was presenting at a marketing conference attended by hundreds of professionals. She stood on stage in front of an audience filled with marketers of all ages. surrounded by people who had once doubted her and those who had learned from her perspective. "I want to share something important with you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "The marketing industry is obsessed with understanding young people and new trends. But we often forget that the people making purchasing decisions span every age group. And more importantly, we forget that insight about human nature doesn't expire when someone reaches a certain birthday. It deepens and becomes richer." She paused, looking at various faces in the audience. "I walked into that agency as someone most of you would have dismissed immediately without hesitation. You had every professional reason to do so based on industry norms. But they didn't dismiss me completely. They gave me a chance, even if reluctantly. That chance changed my life completely. And now, through the bridge strategy, we've helped hundreds of older professionals re-enter this industry. Some of them are developing campaigns that are changing how brands communicate. Some are mentoring the next generation of marketers and teaching them that age brings valuable perspective, not because they're more talented than younger professionals necessarily, but because they were given the opportunity to prove that experience still matters." The conference hall was completely silent, every person listening intently. "The question isn't whether there's valuable talent and perspective being wasted," Diana continued with passion. "And the question is whether we have the courage to look for it in people who don't fit the industry's preferred demographic, and whether we're willing to challenge our own biases about who can still contribute meaningfully. Because I promise you, some of the deepest insights about consumer behavior are waiting in people over 50, over 60, over 70 who were pushed out of this industry simply because they aged. They're just waiting for someone willing to believe in them again and give them a real chance." After her presentation, people stood in line for nearly 2 hours to speak with her. Some wanted advice on their campaigns and strategies. Others wanted to learn about the Bridge Strategy program and how they could get involved. But the conversations that meant the most were with Michael, Jessica, and Tyler. "I want to apologize," Jessica said sincerely. "I was cruel and dismissive that day. I judged you without knowing anything about you or what you'd accomplished. You were caught in the culture of your industry," Diana said kindly. "Your company was failing to innovate, and then an older woman walked in claiming she could help. From your perspective at that moment, it seemed absurd. I'm not angry about that. I'm grateful you were willing to be proven wrong and learn from it." Tyler said, "I've been mentoring in the Bridge strategy for 6 months now. I've learned more about strategy and human psychology from those conversations than I learned in my entire MBA program. It's humbling how completely my assumptions about the relationship between age and capability were wrong." Michael simply smiled and put his hand on Diana's shoulder with warmth. "Thank you. Thank you for walking in that day, for being patient with us when we didn't deserve it, for not letting our dismissal stop you, and for creating something that proves age discrimination is not just morally wrong, but also strategically stupid." The sun was setting over the city as Diana left the conference center that evening. Below, the streets were filled with people of all ages, many of them working in industries that didn't value their experience simply because of how old they were. Some of them were probably people with valuable insights and perspectives, people whose experience could solve problems if they were just given a chance. She thought about the journey from that day when she walked in with nothing to this moment now. It wasn't a simple story of redemption, though it contained elements of that. It was a story about bias and invisibility, about the cost of our assumptions, and about the profound waste that occurs when we judge people's value by their age rather than their capability. It was about second chances and proving that careers can be rebuilt. It was about refusing to disappear simply because society expected you to. Tomorrow she would be back at work, developing strategies, mentoring younger professionals, making decisions that would shape campaigns and brand narratives. But tonight she allowed herself to observe the city, grateful for people who had the courage to look past stereotypes, and for the knowledge that somewhere out there, another older professional was about to get their chance to prove what they still had to offer. The cycle would continue, and each person given a chance would help others reclaim their value and place in the professional world.